Let me talk.
Okay. All right, 118.2.
So, we know that Elizabeth Warren supports free and full health care for all illegal aliens because she raised her hand during one of the debates
Okay.
when she was asked that question. She has a plan to eliminate all student debt by just canceling it. So 45 million students would not have to pay their college
Really?
debt.
100% canceled.
That's what she says. I mean,
According to
you
what?
can
Because
read-
that's...
This is CNBC.
All right, fine. Kinda.
There is and finally, she full-throatedly supports reparations for blacks for slavery.
What is that? Are there any specifics attached to that? Because, like, is it a Starbucks gift card or is it $50,000?
Okay, according to Vox.com, Elizabeth Warren gives a full-throated endorsement of reparations at CNN Town Hall. Warren didn't say whether that should include financial reparations.
Okay, all right.
Families of formerly enslaved people gave a ringing endorsement for, While Warren stopped short of calling for direct payments, she threw her support behind a bill in the U.S. House to study the issue and acknowledge the persistence of racial injustice in America.
Okay, so is it reasonable to say that it's her policies that make you not like her rather than her fucking being...
I also don't think that it's been debunked that she used her supposed Indian heritage to help her in her career.
Okay, so
That
we could. I don't know. You want to waste
some-
time looking it up? Let's just leave
I
it an
know,
open
but
question.
I think she's a vile. I always use the vile. I think she's a disgusting and stupid person.
All right, what's the
How do you
next?
feel about Trump calling her Pocahontas?
I think he should. I think he should call her Pocahontas.
Well, because I hope you don't think you thought that up because I've already seen her on Twitter.
I know. I
Okay,
know.
all right,
and wait a minute. There was another one. Fake-a-Joea
Okay, I mean,
and
as long as the...
and Liawatha.
All right. So what's the next thing?
Oh yeah, Denmark and Greenland.
All right, Denmark. Trump wanted to buy... Denmark owns Greenland, the world's largest island. Unless you count Australia as an island, which people don't because it's an arbitrary thing. But anyway, it's a big fucking thing. And it would be nice to have, with climate change and all, it might become a place you could live comfortably 60 years from now if the temperature goes up some. Right now it only has 51,000 people. But Denmark said, no, we're not giving up this honking big island. And then Trump canceled his trip to Denmark. I don't know why was he going to Denmark?
To talk about that with the Prime Minister.
Well, all right, so anyway, it didn't work out. Truman brought it up in the 50s. It wasn't for sale back then either. It'd be nice to have it, though Canada has a shitload of big islands too, but I don't think they want to sell any of those.
All right, my response is that it's just one more example of Trump's genius. I mean, I have to admit, I'm a fairly bright guy, and it never occurred to me that we would buy Greenland or somehow acquire it. And I just think Trump's a genius for thinking of that. Just he looked at this thing and thought maybe we could buy it. If it only has 58,000 people, it's a realistic thing to suggest.
It's not realistic. I mean, it doesn't hurt to ask, I guess. But Denmark, a small country, mostly owns. They let Greenland govern themselves.
They're autonomous.
Yeah, but a little country would want to give up like 90% of the land it owns? No. But anyway, I mean, sure, go ahead and ask.
By the way, there's a good story about that. Since
okay.
if we must talk about Greenland, Greenland is mostly ice covered, and Iceland is a beautiful, very green and verdant island. And what happened was the Vikings, when they were exploring, they found those things out. And so when they came back to the mainland in Europe, they didn't want other people to know what they discovered. So they called Greenland, which was covered with ice, they said it was Greenland. And they said Iceland, because it was verdant and beautiful, they called it Iceland in order to put people off the track. So we're still living with Viking deception. All right, go ahead.
Next thing.
So the Trump administration has been dogged, and there's evidence to suggest that by three things. First, the Russians being a racist, and now it's the recession. So those three things are dogging Trump.
The
Okay?
3 R's?
The 3 R's, yes. Russians, recession, racist and recession. Can you just comment on that? And do you think that is kind of like trying to take away attention from what the impending investigations that are coming out to see if the FBI, in fact,
it's a liberal trope. It's a conservative trope to say that Trump is playing four-dimensional chess. That everything he does is a stroke of genius, and we just don't necessarily see the genius yet. But it'll become clear in time. Similarly, liberals like to say that everything Trump does is a distraction of some other thing, from some other thing. And I don't know. I think Trump is pretty spontaneous, and we discussed the possible recession yesterday, and we talked about racism a little bit. And what's Russia? We never stop talking about fucking Russia.
but do you think that's a distraction for the IG report that's going to be coming out and the possible indictment? It could be
I think
the worst scandal in American history when the truth, if in fact whatever comes out in terms of the FBI playing a role in terms of the dossier and all that.
No, I don't think anything's a fucking distraction from anything else. I think people are kind of doing their best moment to moment, and certain things are known to be strategic. Like if you have bad news, you release it at 6 p.m. on Friday evening so you can hope that it doesn't get picked up as a news item, that it fades away over the weekend. But everything being just, Lance?
I think what we're witnessing is the news media is flexing their muscle. What they want to be able to do is to literally control American society. I used to think they wanted the Democrats to have power. I now think they want themselves to have power. Because they want to be able to choose who's in the White House. And so they are continuously lying about Trump. They've been lying about him for several years now. And they've, in my opinion, made up a hoax that he's a racist, a hoax that he's a Russian spy, a hoax that we're going into recession. These are things that are made up in the corporate offices of the New York Times, the Washington Post. There's no evidence for any of these things. The director raised an interesting question. He said, is this to cover up the real conspiracy, and that is that the Obama administration refused to relinquish power. They wanted to destroy Trump by using spies and the intelligence networks. This week, now I have to release these things in dribbles, and I hate having to keep talking about the dossier, so I'm not going to.
Just say what happened this week.
This week, the two originators, these were the very, very earliest people mentioned as behind the Russian conspiracy. Mifsud and Stephen Halper.
Yeah, they're all over that.
Those two individuals admitted publicly for the first time that they are spies for the American intelligence. So the way they did it, just if you're following, just so you know, I'll flesh it out with a little detail. Mifsud, his lawyer, has now gone public and said Mifsud was working for American intelligence, and Stephen Halper has sought immunity from prosecution because General Flynn is now suing him for lying about him. And Stephen Halper says that he should be immune because he was working for American intelligence.
Is it possible? I mean, in spy movies, sometimes people work for more than one boss. Is it possible they were also working for some country other than the U.S. at the same time?
Well, I can't deal with fantasy, Rick. I'm just presenting the facts.
Because these guys are all over that book.
The two people that entrapped Papadopoulos were both American spies.
Well,
so before Papadopoulos, so just to refresh people's memory, I have to now. I'm sorry, Rick. I'll have to speak for a moment. Papadopoulos is considered the origin of the Russia conspiracy, that Trump colluded with Russia. And the reason for that is that Papadopoulos, said to Stephen Halper, he actually said to a fellow named Ambassador Downing of Australia that the Russians had gotten control of Hillary's emails. Now, the only way he could have known that is if he was working for the Russians or if someone had told him, and it turns out that it was Joseph Mifsud, who is now revealed to be an American spy.
All right, let me...
No, I'm not finished because the audience doesn't understand what I was saying. Papadopoulos is the origin of the investigation so far against Trump because he was working for Trump. He was a very, very low-level guy. He was 25 or 26 years old. And apparently Joseph Mifsud, an American agent, met with Papadopoulos casually and told him that the Russians had access to Hillary's emails. Then a couple weeks later, Downing, the Australian ambassador, asked Papadopoulos, do you think that the Russians are interfering in the election? Papadopoulos told Downing that he'd heard that Hillary's emails were being read by the Russians, and that is how it all started. So as of now, what is critical in understanding this is the whole Russia witch hunt against Trump began with Mifsud and Papadopoulos, and Mifsud now admits that he was working for the Obama administration. He's an American spy. Now, if that doesn't scare the crap out of you, I don't know what does.
So let me say two things about this book. One is that I know everybody walks around with Kindles and everything now, but it's nice to walk around with a book like this, especially if you got it from the library and it's covered with that Mylar, because if you get into some shit with somebody, you can fucking hit them with this. And it's a good weapon, and if it's covered with that Mylar, you maybe won't leave any DNA on the person. Secondly, to flesh out the thesis of this book, this book says that Trump told Roger Stone on January 1st, 2013 that he was going to run for president. Roger Stone spread it from there, and then
What
Trump
year-
was not quiet about it.
What year did he tell us?
2013.
Okay.
More than roughly 2.5 years before he announced he came down the escalator. And behind the thesis of this book is that all these foreign leaders kind of already knew Trump as a rich real estate guy, and they dealt with him a lot, and they found him easy to deal with because he liked money. And, they could buy shit from him, and he'd get all, so anyway, the idea, just to entertain the possibility that if you could get a guy who's already comfortable with all these foreign leaders and who loved money, who self-admittedly said, I'm greedy, 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 all these foreign leaders are like, yeah, that would be a guy that we would like to have in office. Now, okay, we had another, so we've been sitting in this studio for 2.5 years, and I look at these people and I wonder about all these people. Is there any way to tell what these people are like by looking at a painting of them? Whether they're nice, whether they're happy, whether they're sad?
I think you might be able to, sure. For example, that guy right there with the black leather jacket. Everyone thinks he's a mean guy, and he adopted that scowl for the painting, but he also happens to be a mean guy. Everybody knew it. There are times when I paint a portrait and I try to show people in their best light, but I also think that if it's an older person, you can tell by their face whether they're thoughtful. I painted a fellow that was feeble-minded one time, and nobody likes that painting. And I think it's because he looks feeble-minded. It leaves people sort of cold. I painted a woman that was a schizophrenic, and people are aware of something odd in her expression. So yeah, I think you can probably tell things, because there are two purposes when I do a painting. The first is to capture a person's personality, sometimes in their best light, but sometimes I hire the person as an actor. And in that case, I'm trying to give them the appropriate expression for the story I'm trying to tell. So in that case, it's less likely. But I also think that you can tell a lot about a person by looking at them, even if it's in a photograph. For example, people need to be aware that a man that is 6'5", 250 pounds is going to have a different personality from a small man. A woman that's extremely beautiful is going to have a different personality than a woman that's repulsive. So you can tell a lot about a person by their appearance. That's true.
So I have to ask, the major architect of Trump's policy towards immigrants is Stephen Miller, who is thought to look super creepy by every fucking liberal in America. What do you think of Stephen Miller?
He's from Santa Monica, by the way.
Yeah, he went
And
to San
Jewish.
High.
And Jewish.
I think that liberals are prone to being very petty when they disagree with someone. I've found that in real life, they stop speaking to you if you disagree with them. I've never had a problem having a discussion with a conservative, even when we disagree about something they're passionate about. I was discussing with a a Catholic the other day who is a conservative, and we agree about everything. And I said something very critical of the Catholic Church, and he responded very thoughtfully. Whereas I think a liberal would have hated me. Leftists, if you don't believe me, leftists, anybody watching this, try it out in your personal life. If you disagree with a leftist, they will hate you. They'll think you're ugly. They'll think you're creepy. They'll think you're a racist. If you disagree with a conservative about a specific issue, they'll often discuss it with you. So try it out in your life.
Well, this I think would make a really good prank. Like to put together a bunch of these clips where liberals, I mean, if I had a TV show and I wanted to come up with a comedy bit, it would be to ask liberals living in liberal families, maybe ones that they only see at Thanksgiving, come out in favor of Trump while you've got a phone camera going, and really defend Trump and watch the whole family lose their shit.
Yeah, that's what will happen. And if somebody... or
vice versa.
I can tell you that at one point, every single friend that I had was a Clinton supporter. And all of them, almost every one of them stopped speaking to me during the Trump administration.
Well, you still haven't answered the question, but what about Stephen Miller, who looks, he looks sketchy, that guy. You think he looks not sketchy? And then there's one more thing about conservatives.
Do you understand what I was implying there, Rick? That leftists are very petty when they disagree with someone?
Yeah, but you also said that you can actually learn about people from their appearance.
There are certain things you can figure out, but their stand on immigration policy, I think, would be impossible to evaluate based on their appearance.
Yeah, but I mean, Stephen Miller does not look like a pleasant person. He
Kind of
just
looks like Fredo, doesn't he? The receding hairline and stuff.
Kind of. I mean, he doesn't. Fredo from The Godfather. No, Fredo was. Stephen Miller's assertive. Fredo was only sporadically assertive.
I think we're boring people.
Or even, no, one more thing.
We move on.
We're almost. I think this is the last thing, right?
Well,
But hold on. I have one more thing, which is conservative pundits with big fat necks. When I see a lot of conservative pundits have big old, not like muscly, just fat, and it makes me think that there's a certain, or if you look at Bill Barr is not, he's not a guy who works out, I don't think. Maybe he is, but like it's, that always strikes me, a good liberal, as an indication of some smug self-satisfaction. It says, I'm okay the way I am, and I don't need to work out or answer the demands of my physical body. I'm just fine. Trump says he doesn't exercise. He gets exercise by yelling. And actually he does exercise a little bit. He plays a lot of golf. But anyway.
Yeah, I don't think you can judge people's political views by their appearance.
Okay.
Just one question for each of you guys. First, Rick, your daughter was on our show, and she's freaking smart as shit. How do you feel like? I mean, she held her ground, and how do you feel as a dad having raised such?
Thank you, because you didn't. It wasn't scorched earth last night with you. Anyway.
How do you feel as a dad for having raised? I mean, she's going to work on a PhD. She's been in Europe studying. How do you feel as a dad?
I mean,
done such a great job. Yeah.
Very lucky, and I mean, I would hope that I'd feel, the same, even if she weren't, all the things you said.
Mm-hmm.
And it also leads to a great amount of, nervousness, because it's a big fucking world out there.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a certain, a lot of sadness, because I'm 59, and plus 59 and 111 days or so old. Mm-hmm. And, I just had cancer. And so, my clock is ticking, my wife a lovely woman, her clock is ticking, and you know, everybody's clock is ticking, and I don't want to see everybody pass from the earth.
Lance, what do? You teach classes in terms of your art students. Do you interview them? Do you take everybody that comes in as long as they can pay, and is there a certain characteristic that you notice from your art students in terms of?
Or how has the art student changed from when you first started teaching?
Yeah. Well, what I'm finding is that being able to paint and draw is somehow less realistic than it used to be. In other words, when I first became a painter, a realistic painter, it was, you know, a normal profession. It was out there, it was unstable, but there were a lot of things you could do with it. You could work in various industries, and it was considered part of life, one option. Whereas today, I think it's more marginalized, and so I get a far more unusual student than I used to. In other words, the people that are going into art now, learning how to paint and draw, and are deadly serious about it, are more unusual. Because as a field, I think it really is dying. Strangely, there are a lot of excellent schools now that didn't exist when I was younger. So the only hope is that there will be so many good, realistic artists out there, young and coming up and doing great work, that people may find value in it again. So it's hard to predict the future, but my experience is it's a very, very rare student that will dedicate themselves to becoming a classical artist.
In a weird irony, there's more realistic art being made now than at any time in history. But it's all for fucking video games. And it's all being done on computers. And some of it's beautiful, a lot of it's beautiful, but it's not done with frickin' pens and paintbrushes anymore.
I just had a thought, and I'd like an opinion from both of you guys, and maybe this can apply to math as well. I've been following MMA and boxing quite a bit lately, and the coaches talk about how they'll have an athlete, like this is like an elite athlete who's in the gym at sparring, he's like phenomenal, but once he gets in the ring on the day of the contest, something's just not there. He gets the fear, the anxiety, do you think, Lance, that maybe that painting can offer some sort of therapy in terms of relaxation, in terms of being present for a fighter, maybe, like to relax, and maybe even math problems? Would that be something that would help? Like maybe this is something that you can tap into. Any like coach out there that's saying, "Hey, bring your boxer in here. We can." You know where I'm going.
No, I don't think I don't think that would be very helpful. But because the way I teach my art, it's for people that are singularly motivated. So I think if someone was, I'll tell you a funny thing. There is an artist out there. There are two artists that I know of who are very famous, and I'd have to refresh my memory on them. One of them is named Cesar Santos, and he's a champion boxer. And there's another fellow, very famous artist in New York, who was a champion jiu-jitsu master. So I wouldn't say that studying art would be good therapy for these martial artists. But I would say there's probably a disproportionate number of artists that were at one point
Sorry.
Now that I think about it, there are quite a few champion boxers and martial artists that went into the art field. So, in other words, I can think of 5 or 6 right now without really giving it much thought. Now, they didn't become, famous, but they were, amateur, successful, almost to the Olympics. And the reason I think that is that if you're trying to get really, really good at something that's kind of an art, kind of a sport, it's related to being a classical artist in the sense that you have to have a perfectionism, you have to be totally devoted, and you can't be relying on what society thinks. In other words, society wants you to be a doctor. Society doesn't want you to be a boxer. Society is not helping you to be a painter, a sculptor, a jiu-jitsu expert, a yoga master, a ballet dancer. That's not what society wants. But those people that are attracted to getting really, really good at a martial art are also attracted to getting really good at art, I would imagine. There probably is a relationship. So although I don't think it would be good therapy, to answer your question, for a martial artist, I do think that it would be good that there is a relationship. I also wanted to say one other thing. I was thinking about Mike Tyson the other day because I'm really interested in head movement. And apparently one of the things that when I was studying karate is such crap. I mean, it's just crap. The only thing it allows you to be able to do is to beat up somebody with virtually no ability to defend themselves. So if you ever get attacked by somebody that's really easy to beat up, karate will work. But one of the things they taught us was always block with your arms. They never said a word about head movement. And so I'm amazed at how boxers use head movement. And one of the best uses of that is where you can see clips of Mike Tyson using head movement. He would actually put his hands down and allow his opponent to try to strike him in the head in a match for the heavyweight championship, and they couldn't do it. They couldn't hit him in the head with his arms down. He had such good head movement. And it really struck me. I've thought about it a lot. And I realized why he was able to do it. And it brings me back to your question. The reason is because when he's in the gym sparring with his sparring partners, he knows he can do it. And a sparring partner for a heavyweight champion is an excellent boxer. So at a certain point in the ring, I believe Tyson realized, well, this guy is no better than my sparring partner. And if I do this in the gym every single day, there's no reason why I can't do this with this guy that's trying to take the crown from me. So my point is that it's automatic, and the skills you learn in sparring, in training, should automatically just come out without you thinking about it when you're in the ring. And that's why boxers aren't hampered by fear. A lot of people think, how do you have the courage to go into the ring with a man that wants to kill you, that's an expert in boxing? And the answer is because that's what you've done every single day for several years, and nothing's going to happen in the ring that hasn't happened to you in training. So this is your world. So of course you're not afraid. You might be afraid of a dentist or someone that wants to give you a shot, or a dog. that's angry. But you're not going to be afraid of somebody that's doing the exact same thing you do. So our director was a boxer. What do you think of my opinions?
Amazing.
I have a different point where you're the one who's doing the art, but for many years I was the one who was modeling. Well, even a few weeks ago for you, and for the past 2 years, modeling means you're alone with your thoughts for 3 hours at a time, with 5-minute breaks every 25 minutes, and that's a painful thing. Especially now, since we're less alone with our thoughts and more distracted than ever before. And it can be a helpful thing. I think right now I'm working on a novel, and I notice that the time when I'm forced to sit someplace without anything to watch or to read, I make a lot of progress in my head. And it might be helpful for a lot of people to try isolating themselves for 10, 20 minutes at a time and see, if you've got something you'd like to think about, it really helps to be stuck in some weird pose for 3 hours. And speaking of my book, it's turning out to be about someone who shouldn't have been smart at all, who turns out to be very smart. And it got me thinking about race and IQ. And I hate arguments about which country has the highest average, or has, you listen to a lot of people who argue that some countries, the whole country has an average IQ that's less than the average IQ of other countries, and this means that the dumber countries need supervision or whatever. And my experience of intelligence is that and I'm a limited sample size, but that the mechanism of intelligence, both biologically and with AI systems, with machine learning, is that you have this potential to learn via feedback, via very specific ways that information changes the network of neurons or circuits, and that this is very receptive to finding regularities in the environment, which is, humans among all animals are better at that than any other animal. We look for things we can exploit. We spot patterns and we go after them. But that kind of plasticity, that readiness, that ability to be presented with information and to turn that information, find the patterns in it, and turn it into something intelligible, I think is a general characteristic across things with brains, and even to some extent now with machine learning systems, which aren't yet conscious, but at some point in the future they will. Anyway, I don't buy this arguments about race and IQ. I think that whether you actualize your thinking ability is more dependent on culture. For instance, Asians are the new Jews. For the past, 40, 50 years, Asians have been the ones who are known for excelling academically, to the point where you have to do much better as an Asian to get into a selective college, because there are so many super good Asian students that you get points subtracted from your GPA and your SAT scores. But that's only been for 40 years, which is way too short. And before it was Asians, it was Jews. And all those things happened in way too short a time for it to be genetic. It has to be cultural. And if you go on YouTube, last part of my argument, dogs are dumb. I have 2 dogs, and I've had dogs in the past, and they're not these genius dogs. Like, people have border collies. They can figure out doorknobs and stuff like that. And my dogs are lovely, but they haven't figured out doorknobs. But you go on YouTube and you see all sorts of dogs and other animals that have figured shit out. Horses, just anything with any mammal with a decent-sized brain, birds who aren't mammals. I mean, shit can be figured out if information hits an information processing thing like a brain at the right angle when the brain is able to receive that information and understand it. And that kind of fertility, of readiness to process information, I think is more important than any minor differences in hardware.
To me, the most important question about intelligence right now is not which race is more intelligent. I think it's of really no interest to me. What I find fascinating on a daily basis is that people with very, very high IQs will often end up voting for a Democrat, and people with very low IQs will vote for a candidate I support, like Trump, and vice versa. And there doesn't seem to be a pattern. I mean, that's what fascinates me, is that if it was true that more intelligent people could arrive at better decisions, then there would be proof that all the smart people are voting Democrat or all the smart people are voting Republican. But I don't think it's that's the case. And even if it turned out that more dumb people voted for Trump, it wouldn't change my opinion. I would just say, what is it about the human mind that enables it to come up with such radically different opinion? What is happening? For example, they found that the higher up in education you go, the more likely you are to vote Democrat. In other words, if you went to college, you're more likely to vote Democrat. Now that's easily explained because the colleges now are Democrat seminaries. Their whole goal in college is to turn out passionate socialists. So that doesn't mean anything to me. So that doesn't answer my question. I'm fascinated at how, given the same set of facts, it's so hard to get an intelligent... I actually think it's harder to get an intelligent person to change their mind than a dumb person. But possibly because the intelligent person, when they're wrong, has a million good arguments as to why they're wrong. So that's what interests me. Sorry.
All right, so I could say some stuff and we get into a fight, but instead, I want to talk about what's the best shape for a leaf. It turns out, well, there isn't a best shape, because otherwise, if there were, all leaves would look the frickin' same, right? We know what the best shape for an eyeball is, roughly spherical. You don't see any frickin' fish with square eyeballs. There are a lot of reasons that make a sphere the best shape for an eye. But there are other things that are so complicated or that don't have a universal optimum that you get a variety of shapes. There are tens of thousands of different leaf shapes. And it's fairly well known that you talked about IQ. Above a certain IQ, say 130 or 140, the correlation between IQ and success and happiness and any other measure of being good at operating in the world goes away. Between IQ 50 and IQ 130, there's a positive correlation. The smarter you are, the better you do at stuff. After 130, no. Your IQ is as likely to not be helpful or to fuck you up as it is to help you above 130. And there are two possible reasons. One is there's no optimal way to live your life. And two, having a super high IQ can take you down all sorts of weird mental cul-de-sacs in an anti-adaptive way, where it is possible to be too smart because you become interested in shit that does not help your well-being.
I
Are you
second
talking about
that.
Donald Trump?
No, I'm talking about me. If you look at my history, I've got a whopping IQ, and I've done some of the stupidest, most pointless shit among anybody I know.
But you can say that about Trump too, right?
No, because if you ask me what Trump's IQ is, I don't think it's above 130. It may have been slightly above 130 at some point, but I don't think that that's his deal. I think one thing that works, well, it works both for and against him depending on what you think of him, which is his supreme confidence / arrogance. The guy thinks he's right, and people who don't like him think, fuck that guy, he doesn't read, he says whatever he wants, and people who like him, like Lance, say he boldly follows his principles, and the country's better for it. So.
All right. I think that's the show.
Do you want to pitch our money account?
Yeah, we've been lazy about maintaining that thing, but yeah, give us money at our PayPal account, which is lanceversusrick@paypal.com.
Why should they give us money?
Because, speaking of, I said
Wait a
that
minute, it's not Lance versus Rick at paypal.com. Isn't it Lance versus Rick at Gmail?
Oh, you're right. Sorry, I fucked up. All right. Hey, so stupid me. But yeah, I talked about some of the pointless shit.
Well, tell him again what it is.
All right, it's lanceversusrick@gmail.com. Sorry,
which you can find at PayPal.
Why should they give us money, Lance?
Well, because we're doing this for you, and we know we have a lot of regular viewers, and if it was just $1 a month, that would make a big difference to us. But believe it or not, $1 a month would make a big difference, because we're not trying to make a living doing this, but we'd at least like to. We have some expenses doing this show.
This show is
It's not free.
The show is cheap, but it does cost. And over the past 2.5 years, I've been slowly digging myself into a financial hole, paying for this frickin' show. And Lance and our director, they give their time, and if you can, just
$1 a month would, if that would actually make a difference.
Pay for the pizza?
Yeah, because we have to pay the director with food. Anyway, that's enough. So should we? All right, very good. Bye.
Thank you.
Let's see those shoes one more time.